So there's another area where we didn't make it all the way across the line. And that was in the Paycheck Protection Act. And we talked about that here in this room. And here's what shocked me. I didn't even know this was the law now. There was a 1974 law that was passed in the state of Florida that said that the government actually functions as the tax collector for public sector unions. And I couldn't believe that. So when the government cuts a check to a public sector union member, the government actually takes money out of the paycheck, the employee never sees it, and it goes right to a union that can spend that money as a political contribution to candidates that the employees might not even support. Now, and again, I had no idea that was even the law. And so, of course, when we found that out, I was one of the sponsors of the Paycheck Protection Act that said, look, if someone wants to contribute to a public sector union, they ought to have the right to do that. You know, we have a First Amendment right to organize as we choose, but that person ought to make the decision. They ought to cut a check to the union if that's who they want to support. Right. And I don't know about anyone else here, but you know, I pay a lot of my bills online, where it just, you know, my cable bill and my electric bill and my mortgage, they come out of my bank account at a certain day every month. And so it would be pretty easy to set it up where if the money wanted to come in your account and you wanted to set it up to go to the union, that folks could do that. We passed the Paycheck Protection Act in the Florida House of Representatives, and we passed it largely because of some of the arguments you gave me right here. And unfortunately, the Paycheck Protection Act died in the Florida Senate. It was never taken up. And so it is still the law in Florida that your government is a tax collector for unions that largely fund candidates that you would not agree with. So we'll be back for more. This is an area where there's still some meat on the bone. But I want you to be aware of the problem. And I want to be very candid with you that it's something that we weren't entirely successful to resolve. But we'll be back. We've got the votes in the House. And our hope is that we'll get the votes in the Senate to have that become the law. Another area in labor reform where we did a good job was to end some of the golden parachutes and crazy bonus structures that local government has been handing out. And this was an area, this would never have been considered without the Tea Party movement. In Palm Beach County, not exactly a bastion of conservative thought, a Tea Party realized this was a problem, brought it forward, and it's the law now. Here's the issue. In Palm Beach County, there was a school superintendent who was accused of destroying public records. A felon, and had to resign amid these accusations. Got a $300,000 severance package. $300,000. Now, there was a city manager in Manatee County, in one of the cities in Manatee County, don't remember the one. The city manager had to be let go because of mass incompetence. They lost tens of thousands of dollars. That city manager, $80,000 severance package. But my favorite is from Sarasota County, where a fire chief had to be let go because he was exchanging internet pornography. $234,000 severance package. Now, you compare some of those examples. Now, fortunately, there was a Tea Party in Palm Beach County that said, hey, look, this is a problem, and the legislature needs to address it. But we know all too well in our community that when bonuses get out of control, when folks in government think that the funds that they really are the fiduciary to administer are funds that they can give out without any basis, without any reason, to friends of theirs. We've seen some unfortunate circumstances like that in our county. We had to rein this in. And so I would have preferred more aggressive reform. I don't know why we have any bonuses in the public sector, and I don't know why we have any severance packages. To me, you ought to give 2 weeks. That ought to be the most. But here's what we did. We said that the maximum severance package that anyone can have in government is 12 weeks. And it was a 3-vote, we lost by 3 votes on an amendment. We wanted it to be shorter, but they extended it to 12 weeks. And it's a good start. And if there's going to be any bonus programs, they have to be based on actual metrics, and they have to be available to everyone where it's an honest and open and transparent system. And so that's a good way to reform some of the labor practices in our state, and I'm proud that we passed it. Another area I wanted to address was spending reform. Spending reform. And again, the Tea Party matters. Thank goodness, starting July 1, everyone that wanted a welfare TANF check from the state of Florida has to be willing to take and pass a drug test. The ACLU has brought suit, and they'll continue suing, but I'm confident that our law is going to hold up. No one was talking about this. How is this not the law already in the state of Florida? Because any job that you actually want to go and get, you're going to have to pass a drug test anyway, and I don't think that any of you should be funding someone else's addiction. And so I think that that was a really positive reform that we were able to undertake, not because it was the idea of anyone in Tallahassee, but because it was an organic suggestion from conservative groups. Really good thing that we were able to do. Now, I'm not done yet. I think that that very same requirement to take and pass a drug test ought to be applied to a wide range of government services. It shouldn't just be TANF checks. I would support it for certain types of unemployment compensation, for certain food stamps, and for some chronic Medicaid patients. You know, I believe that we should extend that, but we're going to work on it, and this is a great foothold that we got in our first swing at that pitch. We also had good yes, Gene.
Can you also suggest this for our senators and representatives?
Absolutely. No, there actually was a proposal that was submitted some years ago, and it didn't go anywhere. But I'm ready when you've got a cup. How about that? I'm ready when you. There's other areas of spending reform I wanted to address. Here's a pretty startling statistic. 51% of the births in the state of Florida are Medicare or Medicaid. 51%. Now, and I guess they're all Medicaid. Yeah, they're none of them are Medicaid. They're all Medicaid.
Oh, I read that Medicare lady.
No, they're Medicaid. 51% of the births in Florida are Medicaid births. And so it doesn't take a demographer to prove to us that that model is simply unsustainable. We can't continue to have more people on the dole than we have people paying into the dole. It does not work. It will never work. And it's a percentage that continues to grow. And so I have this radical view that if someone wants to be a Medicaid patient, they ought to have some skin in the game. Now, there was one lady who had shown up to an emergency room, the most expensive type of health care you could get, 17 times in 3 years. 17 times in 3 years. And so the Department of Health called her and said, you know, what is the issue? I mean, should we provide you transportation? Do you need a list of primary care physicians so that you can, you know, go and get some primary care so you don't end up in the emergency room? And she said, oh no, she said, I live right across the street from the ER, so it's just easier for me to walk right over. And I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't so frightening. If it wasn't so tragic, that is the system that we've created, and those are the incentives that we've built into state government. And so I have this radical idea, and it became the law, that we're going to require some copay from a Medicaid patient. $5, $10 for certain procedures, because people have to ultimately be responsible for their own health care at some level. You know what I mean? And I had one of those cookies, so I might not be one to talk about this, but if someone is clinically obese and on Medicaid, they ought to have to enroll in a weight loss program. If someone is a smoker and on Medicaid and you're going to pay for their lung transfer and their emphysema treatment, they ought to have to stop smoking. And they ought to be enrolled in anti-smoking programs so that they can get off of the government dole. And so we built that into our Medicaid reform package. And the other thing we built in, thanks a lot to Terry, is that we're going to have real medical malpractice reform where we're not going to let Medicaid patients cash in on the litigation lottery that is medical malpractice. Because we have this predatory business model in the state of Florida where plaintiff's attorneys, look, you know, I'm an attorney, and I could sue D tomorrow. Courthouse is an open day. But if I sued D tomorrow, he would have to go hire a lawyer and pay him, even for like a frivolous case, probably about $20,000 just to get that case out of court. And what that means is that it's always going to make sense for D or his insurance company to settle with me for maybe $10,000 or $7,000 or $15,000. And if I'm a lawyer and I get a third of that, and do 2 or 3 of those a month, that makes a law practice. And we have to deconstruct that business model. We have to have quicker and more efficient ways to get frivolous lawsuits out of the system. You know, one of the things that Terry and I have worked on is that in some of these complex medical malpractice cases, to ensure that they have some validity, to ensure that they have some merit, is we ought to have doctors, people in the medical profession, take a look at the file before we go off to picking juries and summary judgment hearings, we got to do something to make sure that these claims have merit. And I think that if we can do that, we bring some sanity to the process, and we don't create an incentive for people to file lawsuits and hope that they hit it big. So that was a good step in the right direction on healthcare reform. Tax reform is another issue that I know we all care about. Thanks to Governor Scott, half of Florida's businesses this year won't pay any corporate income taxes. Now, we know this works because this is what they did in the state of Texas. Did you know that last year, half of the jobs created in the entire country were created in the state of Texas? And by the way, Don, is Don still here? Yeah, I think Rick Perry would make an interesting candidate for president. Because he knows that there is a recipe. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. If we cut taxes, limit regulation, and if government will kind of take our hand off of the back of the bicycle, the economy can and will work. And so half of Florida's businesses won't pay that corporate tax. Now another problem that we have is we have a property tax system in Florida that is all screwed up. And we have a Save Our Homes has been great for a lot of folks, but it's fundamentally created a burden shift where non-homestead property have seen their taxes increase exponentially. And that's what businesses need. They need land to build things on. And that property tax burden is a hanging liability. And so we passed legislation to say that the taxes on those non-homestead properties cannot go up more than 5% every year. That provides some predictability to these businesses that could potentially relocate to Florida, and ultimately may provide up to $200 million in property tax relief across the state. The recapture rule. Has anyone heard of the recapture rule? Dave has? All right, great. Rebecca? The recapture rule to me is this sort of nutty Lawton Childs era law that we have embedded in our Constitution. It says that when property values go up, of course, property taxes go up. But the weird part is, when property values go down, property taxes can still go up to recapture the elements of the Save Our Homes benefit that many Floridians receive. And so, you know, I think that when people have less, government ought to have less. And so we are putting on the ballot for your review the opportunity to repeal the recapture rule. It has to be done by the voters of Florida because it's in the Constitution, so it'll be one of the constitutional amendments on the ballot, and we'll need your help. Can't do it without you. We've got to get that 60% threshold to forever repeal the recapture rule. But that was an idea that was brought by Tea Party groups across Florida, and we're going to get it done. Regulatory reform. This is like the most dry and boring part of my talk every time, but I always love to talk about it. I serve on the Rulemaking and Regulation Committee in the Florida House, and you know, when I first get there to Tallahassee, I want to do some things. I want to ease burdens. I want to be an advocate for free enterprise and economic freedom. And every time I try to do something to create that flexibility, I get told, well, the APA won't let us do that. The APA is going to block that. And I thought, who is this powerful special interest that is the APA? And in reality, it is the Florida Administrative Procedures Act. Little known, Administrative Procedures Act. And in that act, in the state of Florida, there are 30,000 regulations and rules that have never been voted on by anyone. They've just been promulgated by administrative agencies and unelected bureaucrats. 30,000 rules. The very first thing I did in the first session that I served in was to say, no more. We have to stop the bleeding. If there is a rule or a regulation that government wants to impose, if the compliance cost for a small business like these, if a compliance cost for a small business is going to exceed $1 million in the aggregate across the state, then it is null and void unless the legislature votes to approve it. Because if I vote to approve a dumb rule, you can vote against me, but you can't vote against an unelected bureaucrat.